I am with Laura Ingraham, a first-time visitor to hotair.com in video anyway.
I can't believe it's the first time. Well, you guys don't like me here or something.
Oh, you're totally hot air vibe.
Oh,
so
okay, excellent.
We appreciate you being here. You're the author of the new book, Power to the People, which we hear on the show all the time.
Yes.
That screeching voice.
Power to the people!
It's a woman named Effie Nwanganza, and she's an old anti-war activist, and she was screaming at one of the, I think, the International Answer, one of those rallies, like during the run-up to the war. And I heard that, and I thought, number one, it is so funny the way she screams it. It's like this shrieking sound. But then I thought, number two, wait a second, when they say power to the people, they mean power to the Marxists, power to the socialists, power to the global institutions. The people kind of get in their way. And so I decided, time to take the phrase back and I think give it the definition it really needs.
Appropriate the
Exactly,
slogan.
for the people, actually the people of this country who have a say, are supposed to have a say in the culture and politics.
Now, your book is coming out the week of September 11th.
Yes.
Did you choose that on purpose?
You know, I didn't really, to be honest. It just seemed to happen that way, but it all seems to kind of make sense when I look at, you know, where we are as a country 6 years after September 11th and how demoralized so many people are about politics, with all the scandals and the disappointments and the pitched battles about immigration and so forth, that it actually, I think, is fitting, because I want this to be like a moment of cultural and political rebirth, which I'm sure sounds kind of lofty and a lofty goal, but with lots of examples, I think we can look at people who are changing the culture, who are actually step by step doing what they can to take the culture and politics back. And you know, you do that, and with hotair.com, and your presence is all over the new media chapter in this book, which is called The Revenge of the Loud Folks, by the way. So thank you, Lindsey Graham, for that. So I'm happy to be a fellow loud folk with you, Michelle.
Now, you opened one of your chapters recounting where you were and who you had a conversation with on September 11th. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was in the gym, actually, in Washington, D.C. My radio show was on at night at that point in time, and I got a call from my brother Curtis in California, and he said, "Laura, are you watching the TV?" And I said, "I just was watching the Today Show." He said, "Go back to the screen." And so I go back to the TV, and I see the buildings on fire. And the first thing, for whatever reason, out of my mouth to my brother was, "They're coming here next." And it just came out of my mouth, and people were looking at me because they weren't really, you know, people have all different channels on at the gym, and I just noticed everyone kept biking and running, and I said, "You guys, this country has been attacked." And I ran out of the gym, ran home, got on my bike, and by the time I got home, the Pentagon had been hit. So I got on my bike and I rode through the empty streets of Washington, D.C., through the highway, on the highway, which is all shut down, and it was the eeriest thing. It was like deadly quiet and strange. And so I get to the Pentagon, and there were about 20 of us standing, watching the emergency vehicles going in, and the flames were coming out, shooting out. And all of us were kind of standing there, the bike messenger, a government worker, a couple of other people, tourists. We were all standing there just mute, watching this. And of course, like so many other Americans, I just thought this country's never going to be the same again. It was wild.
Right. So how do you apply this principle of power to the people when it comes to the war on terror? I mean, we'll talk about immigration in a second, but a lot of people felt very helpless in the wake of 9/11, seeing the left undermining every Bush war on terror policy. And people feel like they don't have a voice in Washington when it comes to defending wiretaps of you know, foreign terrorists, or FBI surveillance of mosques, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, how do you reclaim power back when it comes to fighting for those kind of policies?
Yeah, I think what you saw with this, the way the public opinion went with the war in Iraq, kind of ebbed and flowed. It's kind of going up a little bit now, but obviously lots of people are against this war. So people would say, well, Laura, if you're empowering the people, then the people have to be listened to, and we have to pull out of Iraq. Well, in foreign policy, obviously, this is very complicated. You know, domestic issues, you know, the culture and the movie industry and immigration and education, the courts, those are all things that people can kind of grab onto and see everyday examples of how this is affecting their lives. But the war in Iraq and the war against Islamic jihadists, it requires the bully pulpit to, frankly, be a bit of a bully, and requires the president to do, frankly, what he's doing a lot more of now, which is calling out the enemies, and that's in the big foreign policy chapter, calling out our enemies, identifying them for the American people, so people understand This is not some faraway, marketplace blowing up. This could be your downtown Bed Bath & Beyond or your Cineplex tomorrow. And the people who are doing this in Iraq, they have something in mind globally, and it's called the Global Caliphate. You've written about this, Michelle, and I think that the PR campaign of this administration has been, and I'm tough on them in this book, as you know, woefully inadequate. People did not connect what was happening on the Arab Street to what's happening here in Main Street. And so we didn't believe, many people, and I say we collectively, I think a lot of Americans did not believe that this, why does this matter? Why are we over there? And now I think more people say, oh, wait a second, okay, this is happening in Indonesia, supposed to be a moderate country. It's happening in the Horn of Africa. This is happening in the Middle East. It's happening in Britain, happening in Spain, Bali, Canada. We have this movement that has tentacles all over the globe. And we get pushed out of Iraq. We get sent out with our tail between our legs. Good luck trying to really stop the recruitment of al-Qaeda, because they are going to be completely energized and completely emboldened. And we need leadership at the top in this country that's not afraid of shaking people by the lapels when required. I mean, Reagan was so, I've worked for President Reagan, and he was so good at going over the heads of the media and going right to the American people. And I think, President Bush has struggled with that, and that's been unfortunate, because you need an American populace that is invested in war. Mm-hmm. When we have to go to war, it's got to be everybody's war. It can't just be those 160,000 men and women over there and their families. That's not fair. It's got to be all of us.
Right.
So what are we doing about it?
Right.
So I think I think we need to connect all of this to our life here. Safety and security at home is directly impacted by what happens in Iraq. There was no doubt about that, and we need to make that clear.
Right. It certainly does start at home, and there are several bloggers, anti-jihad bloggers, who have flagged groups like Al-Fuqra right here, in the D.C. suburbs. They're monitoring the mosques that the feds should be doing.
Right. There's a corridor.
Right.
There's a corridor in Northern Virginia,
right,
of scary people, frankly.
And I assume the feds are monitoring them like
we
that.
Hope so.
But then when you have the Justice Department sponsoring exhibitions with the Islamic Society of Northern America, you just wonder, wait a minute, they're supposed to be protecting us from these kind of people, and yet we see them in bed with them.
I think the people want to be empowered to feel that their political leadership can talk to them about these issues. And it doesn't mean you be rude or you have to be politically incorrect on purpose or offend groups on purpose, but it does mean you have to be authentic. People want an authentic leader, and that means they want someone who's going to talk straight about what's going on here. And it's too much at stake. There is too much at stake to pussyfoot and say, well, my good friends in Saudi Arabia. No, okay? You guys have to be forces of change in the Muslim world, or this whole thing is going to be imperiled for all humanity. And that's required of you to be at the bargaining table. And I think that's one thing that in this book I'm just so dedicated to this idea that America, and being nationalistic in a good way about America, that is going to require all of us to get engaged. You can't tune it out because it's on CNN or Fox. You have to tune in. You have to tune into what's happening. And that's why when you've come on our show, you've told me about these blogs, these new media sites that are on fire. These things, there's so much information out there. And it's up to us as consumers of this information to digest it and require of our leadership the type of marketing campaign, frankly, for this investment that we're all making. And get that marketing campaign humming. It's got to hum for all of us. And right now, it's still not, I don't think.